It's not often that a group turns against you because you're incorrect. It's because you can't be controlled anymore. That one reality explains more betrayals, stealthy assaults, and jealousies that are planned than most people would confess. Because envy doesn't tell the truth, it puts everything in order. It speaks softly. It makes groups behind grins. And when you become hard to anticipate, hard to replace, or hard to pressure, something amazing occurs. The same individuals who used to put up with you now pay special attention to you. Here is something that most people don't like to hear. Research in organizational psychology shows that organizations who are angry at each other are far more likely to break apart than groups that are working toward a common goal, not because they're not smart, but because resentment takes a lot of emotional work to keep up. Someone needs to keep the rage going. Someone needs to keep the tail straight, and someone always messes up. That isn't karma, that's numbers. This scenario is even more paradoxical, and if you're paying attention, a little humorous, since envious groups nearly always think they're the brightest individuals in the room. They mix up volume with strategy and numbers with strength. It's like seeing 5 people fight over who is driving the vehicle, when no one realizes that it is out of gas, confident yet with no clear direction. This is when your tail starts to differ from theirs. You were doing something far less spectacular and much more hazardous to them while they were busy watching you, studying you, and planning for your failure. You were thinking, changing your mind, learning new patterns, and getting away from habitual reactions, not because you were scared or angry, but because you were clear. And it's the part that no one tells them about. The organization doesn't know what to do when someone outgrows the position they were given. The playbook stops operating. The pressure methods don't work. The stories start to disagree with each other. What started out as a group effort morphs into people not trusting each other and blaming each other in secret. This isn't a narrative about retribution or taking over. It's about what happens when intellect meets patience, when awareness meets restraint, and when a bunch of envious people discovers a little too late that the person they were after quit playing the same game a long time ago. Stay with me, because what's coming next isn't loud, exciting, or movie-like. It's far worse than that. First, you stopped doing what they told you to do. You came to terms with something that was both difficult and liberated at some time. It was never you as a person who was the issue. They had already written down the version of you that they wanted to see, the reliable one, the easy one, the one that responds, explains, calms things down, and takes the heat so others don't have to. That position made their lives more predictable and gave them a sense of stability in their authority. And you quit doing it without creating a disturbance or telling anybody. That one change hurt their plans more than any debate ever could. People that want to dominate you don't really care about who you are. They look at how you act while you're under stress. They lost their power when you modified that pattern. You weren't louder. You weren't any colder. They were perplexed because you were no longer accessible to be manipulated. What bothered them the most wasn't opposition, but absence. You didn't hurry to correct what you thought. You didn't rush to explain what you meant. You didn't leap when others quietly expected you to. You let there be uncomfortable pauses. You let folks sit with their own ideas. That's when things begin to go wrong behind the scenes. A group that is envious requires its objective to be the same all the time. They require you to be little in the same ways so that their tail continues operating. When you broke character, they had to modify the screenplay on the spot, which showed how weak it always was. Some people attempted to get you to go back to the previous version. Some people were angry for no reason. Some people worried because they couldn't work together anymore without your expected answers. This wasn't about getting distant or alienated. It was about being purposeful. You made the choice of who could get to you, who needed to know, and who didn't. That one choice changed the balance. You weren't going against them. You were changing who you were. And here's the truth. Most people aren't ready for it. They don't know what to do with someone who doesn't play along anymore but also doesn't fight. Someone who just becomes too old for the job and moves on. That's when targeting becomes confusing. Mistakes happen when you're confused, and errors go within. You didn't win by force. You defeated them by not being who they needed you to be. Number 2, you found that their shortcoming was not intellect but coordination. Most people think that organizations who go after someone do it because they are smarter, more prepared, or simply more competent. That's a trap. The intellect of a jealous group are not what makes them weak. It's their urge to work together and their need to agree. They live by coordination, which is the unspoken dance of who says what, who supports whom, and who starts the rumor. Their entire business falls apart without it. You observed that early on when they were busy talking to each other and making sure their tails matched and their anger kept the same. You didn't need anyone's permission. You didn't need a committee to get things done. You made each step on your own, carefully, and without being seen until it was too late. They were sluggish because they had to be in tune with each other, but you were quick, free, and untouchable. The irony is harsh. People that are after you typically think that their power comes from being smart. In actuality, it's a weak structure that relies on time, shared beliefs, and emotional stability. The whole structure shakes when one individual wavers. The story breaks apart when one person stumbles. You didn't have to take them apart. You just didn't want to be a part of their beat. They were weak because they had to coordinate vocally, required each other's approval regularly, and were willing to do everything to keep their skein together. Everything changes now that I know this. It's not about outsmarting them in the usual way anymore. It's about taking advantage of the fact that they can't do things on their own. A jealous group needs additional people to join in. The appearance of everyone agreeing and everyone believing the same tale. You didn't argue or tell anybody. You just left the group's equation, and their cooperation slowly fell apart. almost without anybody noticing. Things became confusing. There was tension, blame moved, and what had once appeared like a unified front evolved into a silent chaos. They were always smart. Their reliance on one another did. When you identified this little weakness in them that they never noticed in themselves, you got a power they could never have guessed. You didn't simply make it. You became untouchable in a system where everyone else had to play by the same rules. Number 3. You didn't tell them. You let them have too much exposure. One of the most powerful things you did wasn't do anything at all. It was being patient. Most people assume that to win over jealousy, you have to confront, yell, or tell the truth about things that aren't known. But the best way to win is to sit aside and allow the other person show everything on their own. People who plan things in secret are good at it, but they also have a big flaw. They need to make excuses for themselves, be believed, and coordinate falsehoods. You didn't have to do anything. They did it for you. They didn't realize how easy it is for individuals to betray themselves when they think they're safe. Every hush checked, every narrative that was too long, and every desperate effort to control how others saw things was a window into their techniques, flaws, and reasons for doing things. While they were busy making their case, hiding their traces, and sticking to their story, you were watching, learning, and getting ready without leaving a trace. You didn't attack, you just observed, and the information they gave over by accident was stronger than any plan you could have come up with. The best thing about this method is how subtle it is. At the time, it doesn't feel like power. It appears like nothing is happening. That's what makes it work so well. People who are envious think that being passive means being weak, but really, it's a mirror that shows how bad they are at their jobs. The more they do, the more they go against what they say, the more they plan, the clearer their goals become. You just had to stand back and not play the game they believed they were in charge of. And in the end, cracks start to show. People who used to be sure of themselves began to doubt each other. Rumors don't agree. Lies come undone. Strategy is replaced by frustration. When they finally understand that their group is falling apart, it's too late. Their overexposure showed more than just what they wanted. It showed that they couldn't keep them. You didn't have to be loud, rude, or over the top. You let the natural repercussions of what they did do the job for you. And in that calm, purposeful restraint, you found clarity, control, and an unbreakable edge. They demonstrated who they were. You simply sat there and watched. The only thing that kept them from falling apart and you from being free was your ability to wait while they told you everything. Fourth, you learned that envy doesn't want you to fail. It wants to take your place. People don't grasp envy very well. They assume that those who are angry with them hate them or want to see them fail. That's a shallow interpretation. The deeper reality shows a lot more. Jealousy doesn't care if you fall. It worries about who owns it. It wants your job, your fame, your power, and your life as if it were theirs. The game changes once you understand this well. You stop being defensive and start to see patterns, reasons, and weaknesses that you couldn't see before. The jealous group isn't only angry at you for what you did, they're attempting to take your spot without working for it. They want to take over the space you've made, the trust you've developed, and the attention people give you, all while working less, taking fewer risks, and hoping no one detects the steal. That's why their assault seems so important and personal. They don't get angry when others make errors. They are upset because you are alive in a manner that they can copy. Once you understand this, you won't take their actions personally in the usual way. You stop attempting to prove your value or make excuses for yourself. You stop trying to change how they see you because you know they never wanted to be recognized. It was a replacement, and that knowledge affects everything. Now, every action you make isn't to protect yourself. It's planned. You build on your abilities, strengthen your boundaries, and discreetly make it hard for others to take your position. This understanding also elucidates the tendency of envious factions to self-sabotage. Instead of working on themselves or building themselves up, they spend their efforts trying to get rid of you. The more they try to get your job, the more errors they make, the more attention they draw, and the more clear their goals become. While they are focused on you, you stay focused on the future, and your influence develops quietly while their efforts fail. Knowing that jealousy is about replacing things, not destroying them, provides you a big edge. It's not about doing anything. It's about watching, keeping your distance, and allowing their need for your space break apart their group. You changed from being a target to becoming untouchable. As soon as you stopped playing by their rules, you didn't simply get through envy. You got around it without ever lifting a hand. Number 5. You stopped expressing yourself, not because you were quiet, but because it was part of your plan. One of the most powerful things you can do to cope with envy is to hold back. When people are after you, your initial inclination is to explain, defend, and make sense of what they want. But you know that any explanation might be used against them. Words that are intended to make things clear may be twisted. Context can be changed, and intentions can be turned into accusations. You made a conscious decision not to reply to every little rumor or provocation. Instead, you only spoke when it really mattered and made sure it was worth it. There was nothing else that was changed. Most people don't get this method since it seems like doing nothing. They could think that being quiet is a sign of weakness. They believe that if you're not fighting, you're losing. But that's precisely what you want people to think. You stop giving them power by not reacting the way they expected you to. They couldn't guess what you would do next, and their plans started to fall apart when they couldn't. The best thing about strategic quiet is that it is patient. You weren't avoiding confrontation because you were scared, and you weren't ignoring it. You did that on purpose. Every time you didn't answer, you made a deliberate choice to deny them ammo, compel them to expose themselves, and keep your position safe. While they were busy making up stories about how weak you were, You were watching, thinking, and putting yourself in a way that they could never have guessed. This restriction eventually turns into a mirror. The more they push, the more their flaws, inconsistencies, and neediness show. They talk too much, they go too far. They say things that don't make sense, and every superfluous action they make is a wound that you didn't have to make. You got your energy back by not over-explaining. Jealous organizations thrive on emotional responses. Their plans go apart when you don't give them what they want. They learn too late that being influential isn't about being loud or aggressive. It's all about accuracy. Your deliberate restraint turned what seemed like quiet into a kind of control that they couldn't see coming or fight against. You didn't merely get through their strikes. You outsmarted them in a quiet, effective way, and with so much patience that their own attempts didn't matter. You knew that groupings fall apart when the reasons behind them change. The most important thing to remember about jealous groups is that their unity doesn't come from loyalty or similar principles. It's based on mutual benefit. They remain together because it benefits everyone in the near run. But the moment those incentives change, even a little, everything starts to fall apart. People quit working together. People start to argue and alliances start to break down. You didn't shatter them by confronting or exposing them. You just watched and let things happen as they did. A group does best when there is a good mix of risk and reward. When people are envious, the benefit is frequently the feeling of being better than you, being validated, or feeling like they have power over you. The danger includes being caught, making blunders, or having problems with friends. You changed the equation in a subtle way by not going along with their story, acting on your own, and being strategically untouchable. The dangers suddenly become greater than the profits. Their carefully kept partnership began to fall apart. One individual wasn't sure. Another person started to question motivations. Doubts that started off little turned into hesitancy, which is deadly in any organization founded on animosity. This is when the brilliance of being patient and paying attention becomes obvious. You didn't have to battle. You didn't have to face it. When situations changed, their own internal logic started to fall apart. People who used to be loud and coordinated become careful and conflicting. Their togetherness was based on shared anger. And when one individual recognized less worth, the chain reaction started. Coordination broke down. Blame changed hands, and control drifted away from them like sand. Knowing this idea provided you an edge that others couldn't see. You were more than simply untouchable. You were the reason they fell apart without even touching anybody. Every time they tried to go back on top, it merely showed how weak they were. What appeared like strength was only a transitory alignment, kept together by weak incentives. You were able to avoid confrontation completely by seeing through the illusion. You didn't kill them. You let reality reset itself while you remained securely on the ground. Their collapse wasn't loud or spectacular. It had to happen since the system they depended on couldn't work without the rewards that only you could indirectly influence. Your awareness gently, but permanently turned their own mechanics against them. Number 7. You didn't emotionally support their uneasiness. One of the most subtle but harmful things you learned was that jealous people need emotional food to live, and you stop giving it to them. Most targets respond without thinking. They become irritated, defensive, worried, or talk too much. They put forth a lot of effort to prove themselves or calm things down. You did the opposite. You knew that their assaults weren't about being honest or fair. They were about getting their own desire for affirmation, feeling better than others, and getting attention. Their whole plan lost steam as soon as you stopped providing them that energy. This rejection isn't about being cold or uncaring. It's all about being exact. You didn't spend a single thought or word on attempting to console or reason with folks who wanted to move, not comprehend. Every time you didn't respond or let go of stress, you made them face themselves. They were more frustrated, confused, and under strain than ever, and they had no one else to blame. Suddenly, the emotional economy they depended on started to fall apart. The more you stopped caring about them, the more unstable they got. People that are after you want you to fight back, explain why, or be afraid. They trust it. That's the portion they can count on. They overcompensated when you didn't want to be a part of their emotional ecology. They went too far in explaining, reacting, and reaching. Every time they tried to get a reaction from you, it showed how desperate and insecure they were instead of how you were. This also helped you see things clearly and take charge. It's a waste of energy to deal with someone else's envy. By not supporting their uneasiness, you were able to stay focused on your own development, strategy, and positioning. You weren't simply neutral. In a way, you were invincible since their insults didn't mean anything beneath the surface. Their anger showed them their own flaws, while your calmness was the quiet force that gave you the upper hand. In the end, jealousy can grow without people who want to be jealous, and you took yourself out of the picture. You didn't fight fire with fire. You just didn't give them the air they needed to burn. You got untouchable by doing this, not because you were stronger, but because you wouldn't play the game they needed you to. Their uneasiness fueled itself, and you softly left, leaving them open, scared, and powerless. Number 8. You played the long game while they tried to take over quickly. Most organizations who are envious act quickly. They want quick results, to humiliate, to be in charge, and to feel better than others right now. Their assaults are loud, angry, and desperate. They mix together speed with strength and volume with power. But you knew that genuine power and safety aren't about winning the moment. They're about setting the circumstances that will give you a steady edge over time. While others were rushing to get fast victories, you were setting yourself up to be the best for a long time. The long game is beautiful because you can see it. You didn't have to respond to every rumor, every insult, or every effort to get you angry. You didn't have to match their intensity or show anybody anything. You instead concentrated on strategies that built credibility, strengthened important connections, protected your boundaries, and learned patterns that will help you later. By the time they saw the change, the momentum had already swung strongly in your favor. People make blunders when they try to get quick results. Groups that are jealous are no different because they are in such a hurry. They get too much information, misunderstandings, and inconsistencies. Every short-sighted thing they do works against them. They think that their hostility shows that they are in charge, but from a distance, it seems like chaos that is organized. You understood this and let things happen on its own, never getting in the way when it wasn't necessary, allowing their impatience to become their weakness. Playing the long game also impacts how you think. They wasted energy on wrath, jealousy, and projection, while you put your energy into being clear, self-disciplined, and looking forward. Their victories were fleeting and superficial. Your benefits were long-lasting and structural. They couldn't match your patience because they were stuck in the idea that they could get what they wanted right away and show how powerful they were. In the end, the distinction is clear. Their short-term wins seem big but don't last long, while your steady, quiet growth makes them panic and confused. It's too late by the time they figure out that the balance of power has changed. They can't catch up since you weren't racing, you were making things. And that's why long-term planning always wins against short-term aggressiveness. You stay safe while others burn themselves up pursuing false hopes. 9. You didn't think they were less than they were. You thought the effects would be worse than they were. One of the best things you did was take every conceivable move seriously, not because you were scared of it, but because you knew how it may affect you. People that want to hurt you typically believe that you will underestimate them, because they think that being confident means being reckless. They rely on mistakes, shortcuts, and careless replies. But you changed the story. You didn't only think about what they would do. You thought about how their actions might affect others, the ripple effects, and even the repercussions that they may not have seen coming. You were many steps ahead because you could see that far ahead. It's not paranoia to think things will be worse than they are. It's about being responsible, recognizing that even tiny acts may lead to bigger problems. Even small assaults can leave marks, and even slight changes can lead to turmoil. You made them act in a more careful and limited manner by putting weight on every action, while you stayed free by being clear. Their overconfidence met your planned patience, and the difference became clear. This way also showed their faults quickly. You see errors, holes in reasoning, and overextensions right away when you think that every action has repercussions. When you looked at what they believed were smart moves, they turned out to be big mistakes. They were playing a game with a referee who already knew the ultimate score every time they attempted to outsmart you. You also had an advantage since you overestimated. You walked slowly and carefully, ready for anything, whereas others hurried about without thinking. You didn't get upset with them, and you didn't make mistakes that let them in. While they kept making mistakes, You saw potential dangers and transformed them into patterns that were easy to see. In a way, their hostility created a map that showed precisely where they were weak. You turned caution into a quiet type of power by thinking the worst would happen. You weren't simply avoiding being caught. You were turning their enthusiasm into smarts. You used their anger, mistakes, and desperation against them, and every action they made things worse for them. In the end, even though they believed they were testing you, you were really testing them in secret and passing every test perfectly. 10. You stopped attempting to make those who wanted to misunderstand you understand you. One of the most freeing changes you made wasn't a strategic move in the usual sense. It was in their heads. You understood that some individuals don't want to know the truth, be clear, or comprehend. They seek stories that help them with their fears, goals, or jealousy. You stopped attempting to explain yourself to those who would distort every word, action, or silence to suit their tale. Once you accepted this, that one choice altered everything. People who want to misunderstand you are easy to spot. They will never see you clearly, no matter how well you explain, how calmly you answer, or how precisely you say what you mean. They will still see everything through a lens of anger. They use anything you say as ammo against you, not as a way to learn more. You were giving them power over your life by striving to be understood. They could use that power to manipulate how you saw things, back up their story, and keep authority over your life. You took away all of your vitality after realizing that. This is where your strength grew without you knowing it. Once you stopped giving in to their desire to misread, they had to work without your help. Their assumptions were not backed up by anything. Their predictions hit a brick. The lack of involvement caused the group to be out of sync, made it hard to coordinate, and hurt people's trust. They couldn't guess what you would do, control you, or count on how you would respond. They found it hard to deal with your independence. Another benefit is that not needing to be understood helps you concentrate better. You didn't judge your success by how others saw you anymore. Instead, you judged it by how well you were aligned and moving ahead. Instead of wasting energy on defending yourself, persuading the skeptics, or setting the record straight, you use that energy into strengthening your position, growing your influence, and making things clearer. Their fixation with misunderstanding, on the other hand, just made their blunders worse. You made the group deal with the effects of their own fears by not allowing them expect to be perceived as they desired. You didn't fight. You just stepped outside of their fantasy. And that little move changed you from a target to someone who couldn't be touched, leaving them scrambling in a story that only they could believe. 11. You saw that jealousy becomes louder just before it breaks down. Jealousy has a beat, and the louder it gets, the more likely it is to shatter. You saw this early on. People who are after you typically grow worse. More frequent assaults, louder allegations, frenzied chatter, and desperate positioning. Not because they are stronger, but because they are falling apart. Their noise is a sign. not a danger. You knew that noise frequently comes before a collapse, even if other people could have panicked. The more they attempted to take charge, the more it became clear that they were desperate. This loudness is a way of showing who you are. People that are very confident don't need to yell. They don't need to get other people to agree with them or keep making their argument. But envy grows when people do well. It requires others to see it, support it, and prove it again and over again. That's why when a group of people is attacking, you becomes increasingly upset. It's a symptom that things are not stable inside. Every response, every repeated allegation, and every rushed move shows the fissures they've been attempting to cover. You had an edge. Since you saw the pattern and didn't give in to it, you stayed calm, patient, and observant even as things became worse. They wanted you to perform, but you didn't, so their commotion was pointless. Their desperate efforts to control how others saw them simply showed how weak they really were. Every big shift they made them less stable. This also helped you understand when to do things. You learned that intervention isn't about responding to the loudest thing. It's about understanding when the storm is over, when the terror has broken up coordination, and when their own escalation has made things easier. The louder they become, the more you know just when to act or hold your ground without having to yell back. You have a head start in predicting when envy would peak shortly before it breaks down. Their cacophony turned into a map, and their need for help became a guide. You didn't have to make them fall. Their bad actions made it happen for you. You stayed cool, strategic, and untouchable in the middle of the pandemonium, which enabled their loudness show who they really were. This turned their efforts to take over into a silent, unavoidable downfall. Number 12. It got too expensive to bother you. One of the best ways to cope with a jealous group wasn't to confront them, be smart, or even show them. It was about being strategically, discreetly, and permanently inconvenient. People who pick on others depend on easiness. They want to put in as little work as possible, while yet having a lot of control. And they want their opponents to be easy to deal with and their responses to be predictable. When you changed that dynamic, you became an issue they couldn't ignore, but also couldn't deal with without taking a risk. You didn't have to fight. You simply made it harder for anybody who wants to become involved. Being expensive doesn't entail being scary or cruel. It implies that to meddle, you need to use energy, do math, and take a chance. Every time they tried to control, provoke, or manipulate you, they needed to be precise, on time, and put in a lot of work, which they weren't willing to do. They thought you were an easy target, a problem that could be solved with noise and teamwork. You became a moving target with invisible limits, patterns that changed, and stability that couldn't be shaken. Their typical shortcuts didn't work. Their ideas fell apart, and all of a sudden, any action against you may have ramifications for them. This method also changed how people saw things. People notice when someone gets expensive to deal with. Allies start to see skill and planning ahead. Enemies start to think twice. What they used to think was controllable now seems like a problem. The gang that is after you can't keep being aggressive against someone who is always on the move and needs attention. Now, their energy is working against them. Their efforts to get back on top lead to additional blunders, paradoxes, and exposes. And the smart thing about this method is how subtle it is. You didn't need to be loud or assert authority. Your clarity, moderation, and posture all came with a price. It wasn't because they were scared of you. It was about them figuring out that talking to you was too much work for them. That one change took away control without anybody noticing. You didn't merely protect yourselves by becoming expensive. You made it hard, dangerous, and counterproductive for anybody to keep attacking you. Their own plans started to go apart because you were so hard to reach on purpose.